All right, howdy everybody. Welcome back to another video here from Tacking and Pressing. In this video, what I want to do is go over how I have addressed some fairly serious spine damage or corner damage with a tacking iron. And typically I do this after a press, but in this particular comic, I'm going to do it before my first press just because I have a feeling it's not going to straighten out in the initial press. So what I have here is an MDF board on top of my desk. It's not super fat, but I use that because it's a better surface to apply heat to than the cheap plastic top desk from IKEA. The other thing I have here is kitchen parchment paper. So in this case, this is just Target store brand Up and Up, which is just what Target national store brand is. It's the non-stick oven safe paper. It's parchment paper. Do not get wax paper. Wax paper will melt wax right into your comic book. So be sure it's parchment paper, not wax paper. And I use the parchment paper for this because it's a form of silicone release paper, but this stuff tends to be okay at letting small amounts of moisture through it. And so I really like this particular form of parchment paper that you can get just at Target. So I have that under the comic so that if I move the comic, I'm not scratching the bottom surface. And I have a backer board in the middle. Now this particular comic is a little thin. If you're ever pressing one of these, I do not recommend pressing it with a full backer board because the staples are super fine. So for this particular book, I would use 3 sheets of my 65-pound cardstock. But I'm going to use the backer board to help give a little bit of extra support here during the iron. And you can see that this bottom corner of this first print bone number 1 is pretty messed up. So right here is the corner I'm looking at, and it's like that on the back too. If I flip it over, you can see that there's a lot of indents. There's a lot of finger bends throughout all of the surface, both on the front and the back of this comic. Unfortunately, a lot of them are never going to come out. So if you look at the one that's really deep here on the O or on the E here in bone, and there's another one right there, you can see that in the glare, and CGC is going to call that a finger bend because that's what it is. But if you look very close at it, you can see it definitely is a finger bend that breaks color, and it not only does it break color, it also breaks gloss then. And so there's going to be no way to press that out, but I think I can at least do some justice to this corner. And so what I usually do is take a second sheet of parchment paper when I'm along a spine, and I just kind of fold it to make a new line, and I tend to just slide the comic in there. You'll notice that this parchment paper has been used before, but that's okay as long as you have a nice surface here for it to lay into. And so there we go. So that's tight. And you don't want it to be super tight to the edge because the crease then sometimes can actually leave an indent on the comic. But I do have the buffer in there, and I'm going to pull it, maybe a few millimeters from the edge. Before I actually iron anything, I'm going to take this cotton round that I've pre-dampened. So this is now a slightly damp cotton round. You'll notice it's not dripping wet. It's not splattering moisture. It's just damp. And what I'm going to do is just wipe the area where I want to iron. So this is a form of what you'll see as the hot shot method, but I think that this provides a little bit better control over the moisture, and it also keeps it from ever directly contacting the comic, because we don't need to make the comic wet. We just need to apply some damp steam air to that corner to be able to loosen up the bends. Here, this is the iron I have. So this is the Hanger 9 iron recommended in the comic book CPR pressing guide. So go ahead and look at that. You can find a link to where this used to be on the Captain Mike webpage. The downside is that these have been back ordered and have been very hard to find. But the important thing is just to have a iron that's a little bit larger. Amazon sells some that are super fine. You're going to want something that has at least about a 2" by 2" surface. So this is roughly 1.8 inches across the bottom here, and it's much longer. And you need something that's about a 2" by 2" square. But if you can do that, and if you have an idea of what temperature you're at, it should work. Now, in terms of the temperature, when I started trying to do this, I kept cranking it hotter and hotter and hotter to get better and better results. That is a very bad idea. So in this particular case, I usually leave my iron right at about 1.5. That's about 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little bit lower in centigrade. You never want to get above the boiling point of water, and so definitely stay under that 2 unless you instantly want to make steam. And what I'm going to do here is just apply a very small amount of pressure and just slide down that corner. And I'm not applying a whole lot of force. I'm not applying a whole lot of heat, but what I'm trying to do is get that little bit of humidity that came from the cotton round to kind of generate some steam and just loosen up the end of that corner. And you can see it looks a little bit better, but we're never going to get it to look great. So that was the other mistake I made when I started doing this, is that the ticks and stuff when I started, I wanted it to be, you know, perfect from the get-go when I was done ironing. The press is really what's going to take care of it. The iron here is just to loosen it up, and so I often find things actually look worse when I'm done ironing them than they did beforehand, but when you press them out, they press out a lot better. And so don't feel obligated like when you're sitting here cranking on it with the iron that you need it to totally flatten out. That's not the case. The press is for that. This is just to lighten it up so that when you get it to the press, the paper fibers can relax a little bit. If you look here at the top corner, we got the same shenanigans going on, so we're going to give that a little bit of an iron up top. I'm just going to use my same seam, same cotton round here. Just going to deliver a little bit of steam to that corner. And again, not a lot of force, not a lot of heat. You're not looking to re-flatten it, you're just looking to loosen the fibers a little bit so that when you do press it, it's not fighting the memory of where it used to be. And I just kind of rub it right across the edge like that. And like I said, it doesn't usually look that much better when you're done with it than it did when it started. It's very misleading. So give another couple of wipes here. How many wipes? I don't know. Usually I can feel the paper start to warp or curl or distort a little bit, and that's usually my sign of giving it enough humidity. Certainly if you see any visible droplets of water on the paper, you've given it too much. And you can see right there, there's some lines forming right here on the edge of the spine. It tells me I had probably a little more than I wanted there. Because those little lines on the SRP paper, those little wrinkles you get from the paper expanding and then contracting, you don't want those to transfer into the comic. So you got to be a little careful, just give it a little bit of a clearance around that area. Just up there, bottom staple. I'm going to give one, this one right here in the middle looks pretty nasty, so we'll give that one a little bit of a quick iron right there. It's probably more motion than I should be giving here. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Obviously, if you get it wet and rub it, what you're going to end up doing is rubbing all the gloss and ink off. So if it's wet and you rub it, it's going to be a bad day. Just want a nice and controlled steam delivery. And these hanger 9s heat up pretty fast, and definitely if you're not constantly keeping an eye on that dial, it's really easy to bump it when you're putting the iron down and picking it back up, and it might be hotter or colder than you want it to be. So I definitely try to keep an eye on that iron dial. That's about that. Nothing too crazy up there. There's a couple of really deep divots up here. I'm just going to try to do that, and I'm going to take this nice new sheet that I have underneath. Just try to touch those up. Definitely if you're going over a large flat area, it's important to get a new sheet of parchment paper just so you don't have any pre-existing lines or wrinkles that you might inadvertently or accidentally iron into that pattern wherever those creases are into the comic. Unfortunately, I have a feeling these are not going to come out because I think they are through the gloss, even if they're not technically color breaking. But we will give it our go. Make sure to put in due diligence and just see if we can get them to iron back out. Yep. And while I did do the spine corner, I can see that there's a little bit of stuff a little bit further in here. This one for sure is color breaking right there. That finger bend, you can see a little speck of white come through. So I'm gonna iron just not the spine, but the area right here, kind of on this bottom corner a little bit, kind of top down. Instead of focusing on the paper along the spine, focus on the paper right about there. And for these, I'm just gonna hold it kind of right over it and then just kind of drag it down. And I try to go towards the open edge, just so if the paper expands, I don't end up with a bunch of extra fiber in the middle. Doesn't take much. So I was just trying to drag towards the open edge. There we go. Looks a little bit better. Like I said, not fantastic, and I almost never see these look a whole lot better after ironing, but it'll really help relax it when you go into the press. The other thing is try to avoid the area by the staples. Might be tempted to iron over that, but because that staple is under there, you're going to end up with some lines where the staple is underneath, because the pressure and the heat is going to rub across where that staple is. I'm going to do the same thing right here where I kind of iron the bottom front corner a little bit in from where it's at. I'm hoping this book will score in the 8 range. It's got a lot of really minor defects. No big creases, but it's just somebody finger bent the heck out of it. And that was about all. Some spine lines, some tense finger bends. I'm thinking it'll be an 8, 8.5. Be really surprised if it comes back anything higher than a 9. I'll also be very disappointed if it comes back under an 8. It's in pretty good shape. All right, so that's my general method for ironing. So thank you for paying attention. If you got some value out of this video, just watching me work under the screen, please give me a like, a subscribe, a thumbs up, tell your friends, share it on other social media. Thanks for viewing from Top Comics Pressing. All right, everybody, this is the same bone number 1 first printing that we did all the ironing on. I have left the stacking layer in here. I know in the video on how to take photos, I encourage people to take the stacking layer out before photographing, but in this video, what I'm going to do is physically be moving it. So I want to make sure it has as much stability there as possible. And I'm just going to slowly rake this over the lights. You can see those spots where there were really deep finger bends. You can see that they're now mostly better. Let's see if we can get the spine right there, right down the spine. So, and the press did a lot of the work here, but it was important to kind of encourage that paper fiber to move. So this is the corner that was really bad. And you can see it's mostly smooth now. The remaining big crease right there is really color breaking. So if we bring that in, you can see it has a really deep white line through it. So that's for sure color breaking. But for the most part, right on that bottom corner now, it's pretty flattened out. The back cover was also really bad, so let's take a peek at that. This was that deep one that breaks color right back up here. So you can see that. But as we kind of rake the light over the rest of the surface, you know, it's smoothed out quite considerably. It does still have some of these deeper finger bends. So this one definitely, if you look at it, there's a speck of white right there. And so if we find that in the glare. Now, it doesn't matter how many times I press it, I'm never going to be able to get that to look good in the glare. And CGC is still going to call that a finger bend. Look over here in the bottom corner. This is one of the areas that was really messed up. And you can see it's now smooth, really with the exception of that crease. And that crease corresponds to the same crease on the front cover. And it feels smooth to the touch. It's really just the damage to the gloss and the ink that you're seeing there in the glare. And so that's the bone 1. To me, it looks quite nice. Nice and pressed up. Again, I'm hoping for an 8, 8.5 on this book. Came out a little bit better than I thought, so now I'm a little bit optimistic about the 8.5. So thank you for tuning in.